story time? Hope so. We are on Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. Harry never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first-year Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least, they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, said Harry darkly. Just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself in a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He'd been looking forward to learning how to fly more than anything else. You don't know that you make a fool out of yourself, said Ron. Anyway, I know Malfoy's always going on about how good he is at Quidditch. I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about the first years never getting on the house Quidditch teams and told long, boastful stories that always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he almost had a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared their dormitory about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was so exciting about a game with only one ball, where no one was allowed to fly. Harry caught Ron prodding Dean's poster of the Westham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life, because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she'd had good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents, even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of a book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging on to every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomstick later, but everyone else was very pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle owl had always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed him a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. It's a remember-all, he explained. Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it right, like this, and if it turns red... Oh. His face fell, because the remember-all had suddenly glowed scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the remember-all out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy's got my remember-all, Professor. Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the remember-all back on the table. Just looking, he said, and he sloped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for their first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled underneath their feet as they marched down their sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds and to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madame Hooch, had arrived. She had short, gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. Well, what are you waiting for? She barked. Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up. Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old, and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. Stick your right hand over your broom, called Madame Hooch at the front, and say, up. Up, everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger's had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms like horses could tell when you were afraid, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. But not you, huh, Finn? You're going to fly all over the place when you get your first broom, aren't you? Madam Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground hard, said Madam Hooch. Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come back straight down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle. 3, 2, but Neville, nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had even touched Madam Hooch's lips. Come back, boy, she shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face look down and the ground falling away, saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom, and wham! A thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down in the grass in a heap. His broomstick was rising higher and higher, started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madam Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist, Harry heard her mutter. Come on, boy. It's all right. Up you get. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital lane. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madam Hooch, who had her arm around him. You know, Finn, to be perfectly honest, falling from over 20 feet and only having a broken wrist, he's lucky. Could have died. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face, the great lump? The other Slytherins joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Parvati Patil. Oh, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like a fat little crybaby, Parvati. Look, said Malfoy. It's that stupid thing Longbottom's gran sent him. The Remembrall glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everybody stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up in a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled, but Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Come and get it, Potter. Harry grabbed his broom. No, shouted Hermione. Madam Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all in trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized that he'd found something that he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. Need to hop in here?
No, how are we doing?
All right, he's doing all right, yeah.
Good.
Seems to be pretty relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Oh. That's good.
All right. Do you mean quiet or can I keep reading?
Oh, you can keep reading.
Okay, cool. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh yeah, said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew somehow what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom. Tightly in both hands, and shot towards Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about-face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No Crabby and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back towards the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and started to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. The next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground, he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and he toppled gently onto the grass with the Remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! His heart sank faster than he'd just died. Professor McGonagall was running towards him. He got to his feet trembling. Never, in all of my time at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock. Her glasses flashed furiously. How dare you? Might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patil. But Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me. Now. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode forward towards the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bag in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on their doorstep? Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open the doors and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore's. He thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on as gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stumped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside of the classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" Wood? Thought Harry. Was wood a cane she was going to use on him? But Wood turned out to be a person, a burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched up the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. "In here." Professor McGonagall pointed them to the classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on a blackboard. "Out, Peeves," she barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, which clanged loudly, and he swooped out cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind them and turned to face the voice. "Potter, this is Oliver Wood." "Wood? I found you a seeker." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall. "The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like him. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter?" Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be being expelled, and some of the feelings started coming back to his legs. "He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive," Professor McGonagall told Wood. "Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it." Wood was now looking as though all his dreams had come true at once. "Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" he asked excitedly. "Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team," Professor McGonagall explained. "He's just a build for a seeker, too," said Wood, now walking around Harry and staring at him. "White, speedy. We'll have to get him a decent broom, Professor. Nimbus 2000 or a clean sweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we can't bend the first-year rule. Heavens knows we need a better team than last year. Flattened in the last match by Slytherin. I couldn't look at Severus Snape in the face for weeks." Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glass at Harry. "I want to hear you're training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you." And then she suddenly smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said. "He was an excellent Quidditch player himself." "You're joking." It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron, "Doctor, how you doing?" Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he'd left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway into his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. "Seeker," he said. "But first years never. You must be the youngest house player in about a century," said Harry, shoving pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. Wood told me. Ron was so amazed, so impressed, he just sat and gaped at Harry. "I start training next week. Only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret." Fred and George Weasley now came down into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. "Well done," said George in a low voice. "Wood told us. We're on the team, too. Beaters. I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year," said Fred. "Haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team's going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. Bet it's the one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first week. See ya." Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcoming turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. "Having a last meal, Potter? When you getting the train back to the Muggles?" "You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you," said Harry. There was, of course, nothing little at all about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. "I'd take you on any time my own," said Malfoy. "Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel. Wands only. No contact." "What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel before, I suppose?" "Of course he has," said Ron. "I'm his second. Who's yours?" Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing up. "Crabbe," he said. "Midnight, all right. We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked." When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. "What is a wizarding's duel?" said Harry. "What do you mean you're my second?" "Well, a second's there to take over if you die," said Ron casually, getting started on his last cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he added quickly, "But people only die in proper duels, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage, and I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. What if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and punch him on the nose?" "Excuse me?" They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. "Can't a person eat in peace in this place?" Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help but Sorry, I need to speak in my Hermione voice. "I couldn't help but overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the point you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught, and you're bound to be. It's really very selfish of you." "And it's really none of your business," said Harry. "Goodbye," said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you would call a perfect end of the day. Harry thought as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing yet. Ron had spent all evening giving advice such as, "If he tries to curse you, you'd better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them." There was a very good chance they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris, and Harry felt he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, I muttered at last. "We'd better go." They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They had almost reached the portrait hole when a voice spoke from the chair nearest them. "I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry." A lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger, wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. "You! Go back to bed," said Ron furiously. "I almost told your brother.